So, okay, here we go. Okay, we're live. Hey, folks, this is John Haller, and I'm with Tom Hughes from Hope for Our Times. And today we have a special guest, General Amir Avivi from the Israeli Defense and Security Forum. And I'll let him explain a little bit about what the IDSF does and its purpose. And then we'll get into asking him some questions about some of the current Israeli security issues. So, General Avivi, welcome to our podcast today. And if you could just explain a little bit about what the IDSF is and what you hope to accomplish with this organization.
Well, the IDSF is a grassroots movement and an organization composed of high-ranking generals, commanders, and warriors, all in reserve or retired from the Israeli defense establishment, the IDF, the Shabak, the Mossad, police, National Guard. And we deal with one main big question: what is needed to ensure the security and prosperity of Israel and the Jewish people for the long term, for generations to come. And we educate about that. We educate the young generation. We're very focused on, at the moment in Israel, with pre-army programs and high schools. But this is growing also to the diaspora. We're very active on media and social media, and we educate decision makers as well in Israel and all over the world.
So, and I assume that you're sort of a Zionist in your orientation. You support the state of Israel and you want to help grow the state of Israel.
Well, we say that national security is first and foremost about nationalism. It's about patriotism. It's about the deep connection to our Jewish roots, to Zionism, to the land of Israel. There is no national security without spirit, without understanding what you are fighting for.
Sounds like a good principle. And Tom, if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, I just want to comment. Just nationalism. Gee, what a concept, you know. And look what's happened to this country because of these issues that we're unwilling to face with reality. And I'm just delighted to be here with you, General.
General, we're sort of watching the elections that just happened in Italy, where a nationalist looks to be the new prime minister, and here the newspapers, the media is just describing her as a fascist, of course. And it's interesting, on CNN today, they were interviewing her opponent in these elections, and he said, there's no fascists in Italy. She's just a nationalist, and get over it. So I think the concept of nationalism is attacked quite a bit these days. So, General, there are a lot of different issues security issues that are facing Israel right now. It seems that there are a lot of security issues facing everybody in the world right now. We saw a couple of explosions with the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea yesterday. We see nuclear war threats being thrown around on both sides of the Ukrainian war between NATO and Russia. And just tell us what some of the main security issues that you see that Israel's facing right now.
Well, if I start, first of all, talking generally, I would say that Israel and the Jewish people overall are facing three huge threats and campaigns against the people of Israel. One is Iran. Iran is surrounding Israel with militias and also with nuclear aspirations. We see today Hezbollah in the north of Israel with more than 100,000 rockets and missiles and drones pointed at all times to Israel. We see these militias also in Yemen and in Iraq and in Gaza with Hamas and Jihad. So basically, we are surrounded by threats of rockets and missiles and drones, and also commando forces along the borders. And this is all also with an attempt to have a nuclear umbrella that will make the Iranian government immune to any external threat. So this is one big thing that we are dealing with for many years. But I think that what has changed now is the level of readiness. They're reaching a point where they might feel strong enough to challenge us. And this is something that we need to be aware of. The other thing that we're facing, and this is inside the land of Israel, I would say it's an Arab-Palestinian campaign to basically take over the land. We see illegal grabbing of land in Judea and Samaria. We see it in the Negev. We see it in the Galilee. We also see an attempt to completely destabilize personal security of Jews everywhere. There is very few places in Israel that Jews can feel completely safe. Whether it's theft, whether it's Molotov bottles, stones, pestering, or different ways that are trying to affect the personal security of Jews. And the third thing, and this is already on a global level, is the campaign of delegitimization, complete delegitimization of Israel, right to exist. When you look at the BDS, they're not talking about two states. They're talking about Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. Basically, in this scenario, the Jews are in the sea. So nobody is talking about solutions or things like that. They're talking about the fact that in their eyes, Jews don't have a right to be anywhere in their own ancestral homeland. And this is what we're facing on a very large scale.
So let's go through those one by one. The big looming one that we see all the time is Iran. So I want to kind of break it down into some different areas. Where do you see, for example, on the Iran issue with the Jcpoa or a renewed Jcpoa of some kind, do you think that that's, well, what do you view as the status of that proposed agreement? Is it going to happen or not?
Well, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I can say that this agreement is, by this stage, is completely irrelevant. Iran is on the verge of reaching the capability to produce an atomic bomb, and therefore this agreement is irrelevant. And it's also wrong, because at the end of the day, what the reason why Israel rejects this agreement is that it basically says that in 2031, Iran will be able to enrich endless amount of uranium with no inspection. This is basically saying that the world agrees that Iran will become not only a state with nuclear capabilities, but with hundreds of bombs. And this is disastrous. It will be a global threat. So Israel is not against a deal. It's against a deal that at the end of the day will make Iran a nuclear superpower. And this is the problem with this agreement. It's simply kicking the can down the road for a few years, and then we'll have to deal with the consequences of nuclear Iran. And this
does the deal that they're talking about now, is it worse than what the last deal was that was in 2015, and then which President Trump came in and repudiated and pretty early in his administration? Does it, from what you can tell, it is, I know there's a lot of secrecy around it, does it seem like it's a worse deal than the last one?
It is a worse deal because now it's completely irrelevant, and it's a complete surrender to Iran. And if Iran if this deal is signed, on the short term, what we will see is huge amounts of money being released to the Iranian regime. And we know what they were going to do with the money. They're going to invest it in their militias, completely destabilizing the Middle East. It will bring the Middle East very fast on the verge of war. We saw it in 2015 with more than 1 million refugees that fled the Middle East to Europe. And signing this deal will create exactly the same situation where millions of refugees are going to flee the region from the simple fact that Iran is going to attack everywhere. And we'll also see another thing. We'll see proliferation. All the Sunni countries already decided that if the deal is signed, they will procure nuclear weapons. So we see the Emirates, we see Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan. All of them will aspire nuclear capabilities, and nobody will have to write to tell them not to do that. They will want to defend themselves against the Iranians. And in a Middle East that is very, very unstable, having so many parties aspiring nuclear capabilities, it will be disastrous for the region and for the whole world.
And what do you think Israel's? I mean, I know Israel has been engaged in a lot of this. I think what they call it the war between the wars or whatever, in sort of clandestine type operations to attack this facility, that facility, and that type of thing. But from the perspective here it's that every time Israel does that, Iran learns and they harden their capabilities a little bit more. What do you see in the near future that Israel's going to be doing to try to stop the uranium program?
So Israel is operating in many different ways, but I think, John, you are right that at the end of the day, you are managing to slow the process, but not to stop it. So Hezbollah is getting slowly, but stronger and stronger with more capabilities. A decade ago, Hezbollah had maybe 15 drones. Now it has more than 2,000. It had maybe a dozen missiles. Now it has maybe around 1,000, something like that, and 100,000 rockets. So basically, Israel needs to think about a more decisive approach, especially against the nuclear capabilities. And, we feel that although this is a global issue, we're pretty much alone in coping with this huge threat to humanity. And if Israel needs to take care by itself, we'll do that at the end of the day. But this is not the right approach. The right approach is having the US lead sanctions, and if needed, also a military attack on these nuclear installations.
Right. Well, we would support a government. I know Tom and I would support a government that would actually do something rather than just giving the Iranians a lot of money. I mean, I've heard numbers under this new agreement that the Iranians could end up with anywhere from $100 billion to $1 trillion over the next 6 or 7 years in extra funds. And I think you're right. There's no way that they're not going to do some kind of mischief with that. Mischief is a kind description of what I think they will do. With regard to the drone technology, tell us a little bit about, how Israel views the use of Iranian drones in the Russia-Ukraine war at the present time.
Well,
how's that changing things?
Iranians have a very, very advanced industry. Talking about drones, they already launched drones from Iran all the way to Israel. So to us, it's not new. We have dealt with drones from Syria, from Lebanon, We just a few months, 2 months ago, we had 4 drones that Hezbollah sent to the Karish gas installation in the sea, and we destroyed these drones. So definitely Iran has very advanced capabilities, and they are testing them and using them all the time. And they have very close cooperation with the Russians, and the Russians are now using huge amounts of drones that were developed by Iran. And just imagine if they get this $100 billion, what would they do? How many drones the West will see, not only in the Middle East.
So, in terms of that drone threat, well, let's expand it out a little bit to the missile and drone threat that exists on the northern border, specifically with Hezbollah. How is Israel proposing to deal with that situation? And if that situation breaks loose, how does Israel deal with it?
So first of all, I have to understand that there is a certain area in the sea that is in dispute. Karish is not part of this area. Karish is in Israeli, on the Israeli side. Hezbollah has threatened that if we extract gas from Karish, they will attack. Now Israel is not going to give up billions of dollars of revenue because of Hezbollah. And in this months, we are starting to operate Karish. Now, Hezbollah, will have to decide if they really want to challenge us. I can tell you that in the Northern Command and in the Army overall, we have done many, many preparations and drills, and the readiness is very, very high. In the past, we had quite a few chances to take out Nasrallah. We decided not to do that. But if he will challenge us, he will be the first one to pay with his life. That I can tell you for sure. And so I would advise Hezbollah not to challenge us. The maritime dispute is dealt with the American side that is brokering a deal. We are very much interested in Lebanon having a solution. Their economy is in a terrible situation. They have electricity maybe 1 hour a day, maybe 2. So definitely we think that stability there is important, but it's not going to be at our expense. And certainly not in our international waters.
Sort of walk me through, or maybe walk us through, what you see happening if things break loose with Hezbollah. And I know there's some things you maybe can't talk about, but just how would that go? What should Israel expect? And how do you see that unfolding? Let's just say it's a Hezbollah starts launching rockets in. And they have quite a few.
That a war with Hezbollah and Lebanon is very, very different from Gaza. In Gaza, we are able to deal with the amount of rockets they have and not without needing to maneuver to go into Gaza. So in all the last operations, you saw the Gazans shooting rockets, let's say 200, 300 a day. We use Iron Dome. We managed to deal with most of the rockets. At the same time, we attack with the Air Force and some ground capabilities, but without maneuvering and without fighting inside Gaza. This is not something that can happen in Lebanon, because in Lebanon, they have so many rockets that we need a very decisive and fast win in a very short time. And to do that, we need to do what we did in most big wars, is maneuver as fast as possible and simply destroy them very fast, and maneuvering into Lebanon. So Israel, on one hand, can attack very, very effectively with many capabilities, and mainly the Air Force all over Lebanon. But at the same time, we will also have to maneuver, and they know that. And because they know that, there is deterrence, because at the end of the day, they understand the price. And Lebanon already is a mess with no economy, no energy. The last thing the Lebanese people need now is a war. So I think that there is a lot of pressure inside Lebanon on Hezbollah not to worsen the already bad situation of the Lebanese people.
Is that pressure that's being applied to Hezbollah with regard to, just don't get involved with Israel? Do you see that pressure in Lebanon with regard to the gas fields, the maritime border dispute that's ongoing? Do you think that the Lebanese government has enough influence over Hezbollah to kind of tamp that down?
There is a lot of players who are influencing what's going on. First of all, you have the Russians. The Russians are very, very dominant in the region, in Syria. They're also dominant talking about Hezbollah, and the Russians have no interest in a war in Lebanon. This could affect them dramatically, and they need quiet. They are very, very busy with the war in Ukraine. They don't need this noise. So I think that they are a very strong voice saying to Hezbollah, you can threaten, you can do things, but don't bring us on the verge of war. The same goes with the Iranians. The Iranians, on one side, they want to use Hezbollah and the Palestinians to fight Israel, but they don't want a full-scale war, because if we destroy Hezbollah, basically, this is the shield they are counting on if there is an attack on their nuclear installations. So they don't want to use Hezbollah too prematurely. They're not interested in a big war. And the Lebanese people the same. So all over, Hezbollah is pressured not to do anything dramatic. And Hezbollah also don't know, if they do something dramatic, what will happen the next day and what will happen with them, because they might find themselves not only fighting Israel, but also fighting many elements inside Lebanon who will take advantage of that and attack them. Hezbollah is not very popular at the moment in Lebanon.
Tom, do you got anything you want to add in on this one?
I mean, I think of that I think it was a fertilizer plant warehouse that exploded, was it a year or two ago in Lebanon? And so we think about the non-popularity of Hezbollah, what's really going to happen. But at the same time, Hezbollah has a lot of ability to manipulate the government in Lebanon, don't they?
They do, but we have to understand that Hezbollah is not in a good shape. There's a lot of corruption inside the organization. There is a lot of activists that are not motivated to continue to fight. The morale is not high in Hezbollah. I mean, they are suffering from the very bad situation of Lebanon also, and also Hezbollah has been in war now for many years. Hezbollah is operating in Syria is fighting ISIS, Al Qaeda, Kurds. You even have Hezbollah units that were sent to Yemen that have suffered thousands and thousands of casualties, and they're not really in a position to challenge Israel now. And so my assessment is that they're not going to escalate it to a level that will be war, but it's the Middle East, you never know.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I think, did you say that the Lebanese are only getting electricity about 1 to 2 hours per day?
Yeah. There is no electricity in Europe already. They don't have electricity. So Lebanon.
Yeah, I was just communicating with somebody in South Africa today, and they have 8 to 10 hours a day without power now in South Africa. So this is a major problem. It doesn't seem like it's the 21st century in some places. Well, let's move on to the next one. The other thing you said was that inside Israel, there's I guess, an Arab problem. And can you explain a little bit more about it? And I think that was one of your areas when you were in the IDF that you helped deal with.
Well, usually when we talk about what's going on inside Israel, we tend to divide it. We talk about the Palestinian Authority, the Arab Palestinians in Judean Samaria. We talk about Israeli Arabs who have Israeli citizenship. We talk about Hamas, that is governing Gaza. Supposedly, 3 different issues. But the reality of the matter is that these different entities are pretty much coordinated in one big effort to completely undermine Israel and Zionism. And this level of coordination is getting better and better. We saw it last year when the Hamas managed to mobilize part of the Israeli Arab society to attack Jews all over the country. Also mobilize Palestinians in the Palestinian Authority, also mobilize Palestinians in Lebanon. So today, Iran, Islamic Jihad, Hamas are working very, very hard to manage and mobilize Palestinians everywhere, inside Israel, Israeli Arabs, in Judean Samaria, to attack Israel. And this is why we see a very big deterioration in the security in Judean Samaria. And it's interesting because the IDF has been in a continuous operation for a few months now, operating every night in the Samaria area, in Jenin, in other places. And although this is ongoing and the IDF is doing a good job, it seems like the events are just growing more and more. And the reason is, there are several reasons. One reason is that Iran is pouring huge amounts of money through Hezbollah into the Palestinian Authority to get people to attack. People are getting a lot of money, and they have a lot of incentive. They are radicalized, and we see more and more attacks. We see Hamas trying to keep Gaza quiet while encouraging attacks in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and all places. The same Islamic Jihad. But we see also one more very interesting thing. We see pretty much the last days of the Palestinian Authority. We're starting to see the day after Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen is very old, I think he's 86. A guy that is really, really hated by the Palestinian society. He is not controlling the different militias and groups he has inside the PLO, and this is disintegrating. and you start seeing militias and battalions simply detaching themselves from the Palestinian Authority and operating by themselves. We see it in Shechem, in Nablus, in Jenin, Ramallah. We see a lack of control in Hebron. So there is a disintegration of the Palestinian Authority. And also on top of that, you have Hamas and Islamic Jihad and ISIS and all these organizations carrying attacks and trying also to undermine the Palestinian Authority. Everybody is building itself for the day after Abu Mazen.
And so where do you see that? What are your thoughts on where that goes once Abu Mazen, in case people who are listening, Mahmoud Abbas, his real name is Abu Mazen, the head of the Palestinian Authority. Just where do you see that going? Or what are the possible scenarios that is going to happen when he's out of the picture? Does he have a successor that he's named or groomed or anything?
No. So he doesn't have a successor, and this is part of the problem. He's challenged by many different groups. One dominant group is people who support Barghouti, the guy who is in jail for life. And there are supporters who support Dahlan, who is a guy that is originally from Gaza and now he lives in the Gulf. And then the guys who are supposedly with Abu Mazen, they are broken into different groups. All of them are arming themselves to the teeth and ready to fight each other. So the most possible scenario is, first of all, we'll see anarchy. We'll see a civil war. Everybody against everybody, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, ISIS, the different factions of the PLO, all fighting each other. And then the question is what happens. One possibility is that Hamas or Islamic Jihad manage to take over. In this scenario, Israel will take them out. We'll conquer all the area and the IDF will take responsibility again of the cities. We cannot have Hamas or Islamic Jihad or any other terror organizations controlling cities again. So this is one possible scenario. Another scenario which is interesting and people don't talk about it enough is that the Palestinian society is basically like any Arab society, is managed by clans, by tribes. Every city has its specific clans. All of them are different. Every city is completely different in Judan, Samaria. Ramallah is nothing like Shechem, and Shechem is nothing like Jenin, and so on. And they have their own families. And even the Palestinian Authority today, everything they do through the clans. And these clans are pretty much fed up from this corrupt organization. They're also fed up with all these radical Islamist groups. And they want control by themselves. So it wouldn't surprise me to see clans, let's say from Hebron, saying, that's it. Now we control Hebron. We don't want the Palestinian Authority anymore. We want to have business with Israel directly. Now, I know heads of clans. We talk to them, and I can tell you this is exactly what they want to do. They want to take out the Palestinian Authority. They're not willing to have this corruption and terrorists and people who came from Tunis managing them. They are the local leadership. So in certain areas, they will take control. And the sad story is that what I'm saying now should be obvious to the Israeli government and also to the US government. And nobody is seriously building solutions and ideas of what to do in this scenario. They're like saying, they are imagining that things will continue like they were before. And this is not the case. It's not going to continue. We'll see a new reality.
This sounds very much like some of the writings, things that have been written by Dr. Mordecai Kadar about the clans and doing something almost like the United Arab Emirates. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, Dr. Kedar is also a member in the IDSF, and we have a lot of discussions about that. And I think that the large extent is right, that there is a strong leadership that is local, that is based on the clans and tribes. And there is a good chance that they will take control. They have only one chance. The day Abu Mazen is gone, everybody understands that they have one chance to make a difference. It's because they know that, and because they know that anybody who actually manages to take control will kill everybody else. Everybody is going to fight very, very strongly to gain control.
It occurs to me, is there any lessons to be learned from the way the Abraham Accords have gone with regard to how this Palestinian issue might be dealt with going forward?
Well, the Palestinians have always been an asset to the Arab world to delegitimize Israel. Most of the Arab world hate the guts of the Palestinians. They hate them. They despise them, not only hate them. But they were an asset, a tool. And when these countries started feeling an existential threat from Iran, and they saw the US administration siding with Iran, they got to the conclusion that the only country they can trust if they want to exist is Israel. And at that moment, the Palestinians became a liability on their way to get close to Israel. So this creates a new reality where Israel has the chance to shape its future. It can sign peace agreements with the Arab world without depending on the Palestinians, and it can also decide what Israel really needs in the long term in order to be safe and prosper. And Israel cannot be safe and cannot prosper without the Jordan Valley. It cannot be safe or prosper without full security control all over Judea and Samaria. And you cannot have full security control without massive presence of Jews. And all I said doesn't mean that the Palestinians cannot manage themselves. They can do that, but the overriding security and sovereignty needs to be Israeli. So I would say this, the national security needs of Israel are very, very rigid. Statecraft is very elastic. You have many solutions. We just had elections now in Italy. So, in Italy you have 3 states, not one. You have the Vatican. It's a state, a fully recognized state, the size of a neighborhood inside the capital of another state. You have San Marino in the north of Italy. It's a state surrounded by Italy, airspace Italian, full security control Italian, and it's a state. So you have like 55 different states and regions in the world recognized by the US that might be some kind of possible solution for the Palestinian issue. But Israel first needs to be very clear what it needs in order to thrive. And this is what we educate about. This is what we talk about when explaining about these issues.
So let me back up just a minute, because I think this is kind of a hot button issue with a lot of evangelicals that would be listening to this interview. What's the relationship right now between Israel and Russia? Is it, well, just tell me what it is.
Well, first of all, it has deteriorated. We had a very good relationship with them in Netanyahu's time, and we were very coordinated. We need the coordinations with the Russians when we operate in Syria, and we do that almost on an everyday basis. We need to really coordinate this. We need an open channel. We also have interest in talking about Iran and what kind of weapons they get and so on. So the talks with Russia are important. When the war started in Ukraine, and me and my organization talked on media, we said our interest as Israelis is not to intervene, is not to take sides, because we need a good relationship with the Russians, and we shouldn't upset them too much. This current government decided to act differently, and the relationship with the Russians deteriorated. We're still coordinating, we're still working together, but it's not as it was before. And it's hard to say. We'll see after the elections what happened and what kind of relations we'll have. But we do need good relations with the Russians. They are on our neighborhood, on our border.
Do you think that anything that's going on in the Ukrainian theater and this thing I mentioned earlier about the pipelines blowing up in the Baltic Sea, does that ultimately have any impact in the Middle East and in Israel?
Well, I think that something pretty amazing is happening. Israel is emerging very, very strong from what is happening in Ukraine, because first of all, the lack of gas that Europe is experiencing, which is a huge crisis, creates a situation where Europe is starting to be dependent on Israeli gas. I mean, who would have imagined a few years ago that Israel will become an international exporter of gas and possibly oil? And this is what's happening now. We're signing huge deals to supply gas to Europe, and Israeli gas is going to save Germany and Italy and many other countries from freezing this winter. And this, of course, strengthens Israel internationally when Europe needs desperately Israeli energy. This has an impact on our power in the world. And the other thing that is happening is that there is a realization in Western Europe and North Europe that they need serious armies. They see what the Russians are doing. They understand that war is not something that has disappeared from humanity. Instagram hasn't changed human nature after all. And they need to prepare, and they are relying on Israeli technology. We're signing huge deals with all countries, with Germany, with Norway, with Sweden, countries, some of them were very alienated to Israel, now need very good relations with Israel. And so things they are changing in our favor in many ways.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, I do find it really interesting. I think John will totally agree with me on this. I was up in Rosh Hashanah not too long ago. In fact, I'll be back there in just a few weeks. And I was with somebody that was from military in Israel, and he's pointing out the buoy that's out there that marks the border between Lebanon and Israel. He said it's interesting that buoy hasn't been a dispute of a border of the border ever really before, that particular one, until the gas finds that Israel now has. Now Lebanon wants that. So I look at this and the reality of something's going to happen that's going to continue to make Israel stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's going to force, I believe, biblically, both John and I could support it, it's going to force much of the world to look to Israel for the goods that they have. In this case, I would say certainly gas is at the top of the list, and maybe even other things that are still not yet discovered. But with that, at the same time, General, I see America as just beyond abandoning Israel. I read an article, it was from an Israeli press about a week ago, quoting Anthony Blinken, and he said if Hezbollah comes against the U.S., comes against Israel, U.S. basically isn't going to help them. Israel's going to have to act decisively and deal with Hezbollah on their own. And I don't know if he meant it that we're just not going to help, or Israel's got their hands full and they need to deal with it. But what I see happening with the U.S. is it's not only that they just are abandoning Israel. I mean, I can't even figure out what in the world's going on with the U.S. and Ukraine and Europe. We watched what happened with the Nord Stream 2. The U.S. has what I believe is the worst leader that this country's ever had. I can say that because I'm American. I don't expect you to. But your thoughts on the United States of America and what's happening to it, and as we see the world literally being reformed right before our eyes. And biblically, we understand Israel it's the centerpiece of all this. Israel's going to stand. I know that. I know Jerusalem's never going to go away because I know of God's promises to Israel. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on what you see happening here in America with Ukraine involved, with Russia, with Iran. You've already talked about that. But I mean, then you throw in all these other terrorist organizations, and here's Biden just, bless your hearts.
Well, first of all, from a biblical point of view, there is a very clear relationship between Jacob, which is Israel, and Esau. And when Esau is strong, Jacob is weak, and the vice versa. So the moment the Jewish people came back to Israel, Jacob is becoming again stronger and stronger. And the more stronger we get, the weaker, at the end of the day, Esau, which is Western world and so on. And it's amazing. I think like when I looked at countries 20, 30 years ago, like Spain, England, Germany, to us Israelis, these countries 20, 30 years ago, they seemed like empires, And today we look at them and say, we surpassed them talking about GDP, economy, high-tech, military power. Israel is definitely getting stronger and stronger. And who would have thought that Europe will be dependent on Israel? And this is happening. Nobody could have imagined that a few years ago. It was beyond imagination. And I agree that this is going to continue. And the one advice I can give any country, side with Israel and you'll be blessed, If you don't side with us.
So let me ask you a couple of questions as we kind of finish this up here. The third thing you mentioned was the delegitimization of Israel. And so I have a question about that is how can we help that process to stop that? And then the easy question I have for you at the end is what's going to happen in the elections on November 1st?
So I'll tell you this, from all this huge campaign against Israel, what worries me most is not the international, in Hague. It's not the people trying to prevent goods or artists from coming to Israel. It's what's happening to us, to the Jewish people. It's affecting millions of Jews who are losing faith and forget who they are. They forget that we are the Jewish people. We are the chosen people. We're very special. And not only they don't feel special, they feel they are villains, or the state of Israel is a villain. And I think that our main effort is strengthening our own people, is really working to strengthen the Jewish people and simply reminding them who they are. Because, look, being a Jew was always hard. It's a hard job, being a Jew. But when you are Delta Force, the Delta Force of the nations, it goes with the job. If you are a top unit, it's hard to be in a top unit, you know. But if it's hard, and also you feel you are not only you are not in a top unit, but you're in the worst one, this creates a problem of motivation. And then we lose people, we lose connection. So one of the things I'm trying to do with the thousands and thousands of officers we have is to reinvigorate Zionism, reinvigorate the proudness of the Jewish people. We started, first of all, focusing on the Israeli society, but we're getting more and more requests to bring our leadership and inspiration and capability, people who have commanded thousands of soldiers in combat, and they really work on to strengthen our people. This is the most important thing we need to do.
Okay. So what do you think is going to happen in your elections?
Well, we have to understand what we are really facing. We're facing something that is very, very problematic. We're facing a reality where several parties, mostly on the left, are realizing that with their agenda, they can never have a Jewish majority. Now, the way Zionism works is that Israel needs a clear majority of Jews, as we have. Why do we need a majority of Jews? For one reason only. So we can build Zionist governments that will conduct Zionist policy and continue to advance the interest of the Jewish people. Now, when you have several parties who realize they can never have this majority, and they decide that the only way they can get the majority is by siding with Arabs who are anti-Zionist, who support terrorists, this is a very, very bad thing. It's terrible. Because we have supposedly mainstream parties who became, in many ways, non-Zionist anymore. Because we have to define what is Zionism on the political level. Zionism on the political level is forming Zionist governments. So if you challenge, let's say, Netanyahu, and at the end of the day, Netanyahu got most of the votes, and now there is a need to form a government, you need to form a government, and it needs to be Zionist. And you cannot say, okay, I'm going to disregard the most part of the Jewish people, and I'm going to build a government that hands the key of Israel to another party, which is anti-Zionist and also terrorist. So we're experiencing something that is terrible, which had never happened before until this last government. We saw this didn't work. The government dismantled itself after a year, and still they're sticking to the same idea. So what I think will happen, I think the Jewish people are not going to agree to this. They expect their politicians to be Zionists. I think that the right is going to win these elections. I think that might see the disappearance of one or two or even more parties from Israeli politics, because in Israeli politics, you need to pass a certain threshold of 4 mandates. And currently you have I'm not talking about the ones that already are not passing the threshold according to the polls, You have like 4 or 5 of those. You have 5 parties, which are pretty central parties, like Meretz, like Labour Party, like and the Russian Party of Lieberman, all of them on the verge of the threshold. 5 parties who are around like 4 mandates, including Arab parties. All the Arab parties are on the threshold. So the question is, what will really define these elections? How many parties are not going to pass the threshold? It's enough that one major party doesn't pass the threshold to give a clear win to the right. If it's more than one, it's a massive win. And these elections are going to be nothing like any other election before, ever.
So
It's not
did you say that?
not another election.
Yeah. Did you say Lieberman's party might not meet the threshold?
Yeah.
Wow. That would be an earthquake.
You have Meretz party along the threshold. Avoda party, the same. Lieberman, it seems in the poll more, but not much more. So we'll have to see. All the Arab parties are on the threshold. So I think it's going to be very interesting.
Interesting. Well, that'll be interesting to watch. Tom, do you have anything else?
It's not just another election. This is what I'm saying. These elections are nothing like the previous 4 elections. Nothing like. It's a completely different thing.
You know, we have one about less than a week after you do. And I think our election may be unlike anything we've ever had either.
Yes, you know, after the elections in Israel on the 7th, I'm flying to New York so I can see it with my eyes. The election for Congress.
I'll be in Israel for the Israeli elections, and then I'll be back in America for the U.S. elections also. So I won't be in New York. I'll be closer to Los Angeles. But either way, John, you know, you and I talk about these things. There are so many dynamics that are taking place right now worldwide. I mean, so many different things. You know, we're really looking at these things from the Israeli perspective, and just looking at this one thing alone, just the things you talked about today, General, is really, we live in amazing days. But at the same time, you know, if I didn't have my Bible, I'd be a mess, because I would not be able to make sense of anything that's going on. And I know when it comes to the Jews in Jerusalem, Jerusalem is always going to exist, and I know it. And no matter what comes against Jerusalem, listen, bad people come and bad people go, but I know Jerusalem is always going to stand.
Yeah, you know, you look at history of the Jewish people. We had Assyrians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans. All of them disappeared. We're still here.
Yep.
Well, we are isn't this the period known as the Days of Awe right now? I mean, aren't we between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
Yeah. Very special times for the Jewish people.
Indeed.
It seems to be worldwide at the moment.
Yes.
Look,
yes,
General, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. We hope we can do this again sometime. For those of you who are listening, I will edit the description in the show notes, and I'll put in a link so that you can sign up for the IDSF newsletter. And also, if you care to make a contribution to the work of IDSF, there'll be a donation link there. So give me about 5 or 10 minutes after we finish here to get those in the show notes. I had them in there originally, but then I had a little problem, and we had to create a new show. So, General, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Toda Rabah.
Thank you.
Shalom. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.